Good morning. This is the March 14th meeting of the Senate Standing Committee on Ag. We're going to go ahead and get started with some preliminaries while we're waiting on one more member to get our quorum. I've got Will and Alex Reedy with me today from my hometown of the Greater Casey community in Fulton County, Kentucky. And which one of y'all is going to lead us? You, right? So we're going to stand and we're going to be led in the pledge on that. While we're waiting on roll call, if anyone has any guests here, I've got a few. We have a big 4-H group here. If y'all will kind of come up so everybody can see you, don't be shy. Y'all don't have to stand in the back. So I'm going to butcher, Maggie, I'm going to butcher your name. So Maggie Blazina, I got it right. Look at that. I'm off to a good roll today. She's a president. And she's from the best Senate district in Kentucky, the first Senate district out of Crittenden County. Lucas Arnold from Hopkins County. Lucas, what are you? Okay. So I bet we're in order here because y'all are orderly. So that would make Lance Mundy from Montgomery County the secretary or treasurer? I had a 50-50 chance. And Catherine Zimmerman from Fayette County. You're the secretary. That's the only one left, right? Aren't you proud of me? I still remember all this stuff. It's been a while. And then Kirsten Foy? Okay, great. Thank you. And Chris, you're here with us somewhere, I think. So welcome. Appreciate y'all appreciate y'all being here. Pull you up a chair, and we'll get started here in a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple guests today. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I have a couple guests today.
Sure, go ahead.
My wife and my eldest grandson, Ethan Boswell. He's a student at the Western Kentucky University in engineering.
I've got a couple more in the crowd. Ben and Jesse Rudy are my boys up here, parents, and then they brought the mother-in-law, Judy, who is one of my dearest friends from way longer than I would like to, either one of us would like to think about, so we appreciate y'all being here today. And just so the crowd knows, at any point, if I mess up, Judy will jump up and point this out because she likes that better than pretty much anything else that she can imagine in life. So we are waiting for one more, and we'll be ready to go here in just a second. Anyone else have any guests or anything that we need to go ahead and get? As if on cue, Senator Westerfield rolls in. That's beautiful. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Chambers Armstrong, Senator Boswell, Senator Carpenter, Senator Deneen, Senator Givens, Senator Thayer, Senator Webb, Senator West, Senator Westerfield, Senator Wilson, and Chair Howell.
Here.
You have a quorum.
And I believe Senator Givens is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. This is House Bill 76. Over the last 6 years, we have done a series of resolutions honoring various agricultural days, a National Agriculture Month, National Soybean Month, National Beef Month, National Dairy Month, National Poultry Month, National Pork Month, FFA, National FFA Week, and National 4-H Week. And so this bill basically just takes all those resolutions, puts them in statute, and I know the ag staff around you would be very honored and appreciative if these bills was in statute, so they wouldn't have to do my resolutions anymore. But with that, Mr. Chairman, that is the bill.
Does anyone have any questions? Do we have a motion on the bill? We have a motion, second by Senator Deneen. We'll have a roll call vote. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Chambers Armstrong, Senator Boswell, Senator Carpenter, Senator Deneen, Senator Givens, Senator Thayer, Senator Webb, Senator West, Senator Westerfield, Senator Wilson, and Chair Howell.
That passes unanimously. Representative Reed, thank you for doing that. It's important to recognize all of these groups, but it's nice to have it in one clean form. We appreciate your work putting all that together.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Love to have you here anytime. Representative Cook, you ready? You've had a big morning. We're going to keep you rolling. Next up on the agenda is House Bill 167. Representative Matt Cook, please proceed. And anybody that you got with you, bring them with you.
Good morning, Representative Matt Cook, 72nd District. I'll let my guests introduce themselves.
Good morning, Dr. John Park, veterinarian, board member.
Michelle Shane, Executive Director, Kentucky Board of Veterinary Examiners.
Dr. Jim Weber, Kentucky Veterinary Medical Association.
Okay, before we jump into this super exciting 70-page bill, I want to talk about the process a little bit and what's gone on here, and congratulate Michelle, who is...
Representative Cook, I'm sorry, before we start, we have a committee sub on this that we'll talk about too. Before we get started, let's deal with the committee sub. We have a committee sub on this. Is there a motion to adopt the sub? Motion by Representative Webb, second by Senator Westerfield. Senator Webb, sorry. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Sub's adopted. Now go ahead and proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about the process a little bit. We first filed this bill last year for informational purposes only, just to start the conversation, because we knew this was going to be quite a heavy lift with a lot of players, a lot of stakeholders involved, not just veterinarians, but you've got the large animal community, you've got the small animal community, and we wanted to try to address everyone's concerns. So we filed the bill for informational purposes only. They had a series of stakeholder meetings across the Commonwealth. How many, Michelle? 15?
At least, yes.
At least 15 stakeholder meetings across the Commonwealth. We actually had a survey that was put out by the KVMA to all there and combed through all their results and made adjustments. And this bill was a living document, continually seeking to improve it. It culminated up here in the annex. We had a 2-hour meeting with the KVMA and the KBVE. We both came together, sat down in a room, hashed through, and got to where we could get both boards in a good place. Both boards unanimously supported this bill. Then we've met with Senator Webb. We've talked to cattlemen's and continue to make changes to it, and not get to 100%. I think that's fair to say, Senator Webb. But we've gone a long way trying to make this bill suitable for everyone. And I'm going to let Michelle Shane, who's done a phenomenal job writing this bill, talk about the details.
Thank you, Representative Cook. So I briefly wanted to address the changes that were included in the sub. They were tweaks to accommodate requests from Senator Webb and cattlemen's, adjusting the definition of the practice of veterinary medicine to exclude farriers and others assessing the soundness and fitness of an animal, adjusting the definition of the practice of veterinary technology to ensure it was understood it's a profession and not a group of technologies. To exempt work on one's own animals, that would extend to the owner's agent, and then an owner may perform euthanasia of livestock. Also, that animal euthanasia specialists can accept compensation from their employer, of course, but not from the public in their work. And we've also added and altered definitions related to the allied animal health professionals, excluding equine dentists from this group, but clarifying that the animal chiropractors and what that means in a definition. Overall, what's in the bill, though? This is a substantial bill, and one of the most important aspects of it is our telehealth framework and VCPR requirements. This is essential because telehealth is not a replacement for veterinary services. It's a supportive mechanism. In-person examinations are critical because without those in-person exams, there's an increased likelihood for misdiagnosis, ineffective treatment, and unintended adverse effects, including incorrect prescribing of medications. This puts more pressure on veterinarians who are already feeling the shortage and ability to provide services to their clientele. Failure to pass this bill will open Kentucky to unrestricted prescribing, which is a very dangerous place to be. It will also reduce our failure to pass, to promptly identify and properly diagnose and quickly contain high consequence diseases, something very important in agriculture, the food safety, and our economic ability to trade our food. Also, federal law requires this in many instances, an in-person requirement. So this framework is built into this bill and supported by the veterinary community. We're also looking to add veterinary facility registrations to help us get a holistic handle on what services are offered where in Kentucky, and to help us address the shortage issues by informing the legislature. We also want to assist clients in locating services and identify and hold responsible non-licensee owners who are in, such as Cattlemen's Farm Bureau, Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and the Kentucky Veterinary Medical Association. We are adding that allied animal health professional permit for animal chiropractics, like I mentioned, expanding our definitions, clarifying administrative statutes, addressing criminal background checks in statute to accommodate the FBI, and this is screening on new licensees related to controlled substance diversion, title protections for LVTs, and increased board authority over those non-credential holders. So that's what's in the bill. As Representative Cook alluded to, we feel like we have pulled together a great group of stakeholders in support of this bill. Over 72% overall in the veterinary community support it. Some areas receive more than 90%, but of import, every area that we surveyed on, over 50% agreement, even fees, if you can believe it. We also have support from the Veterinary Technician Association, the Board of Chiropractors, and that is all.
It's been the Veterinarian Act, Practice Act, they tried to pull this open several different times, and there's been minor changes, but this is the first major change in over 30 years of the Veterinarian Practice Act. So there is, understandably, a lot of catch-up going on here with this bill. And I got to thank Deborah Hamelback is behind me. She's done wonders working on the KVMA side. I think my favorite part of the entire bill is a scholarship part. And I don't know if we want to touch on that a little bit more. We all know about the vet shortages throughout Kentucky.
Please do.
The registration is obviously we're trying to identify where these drought areas are, where we are missing these large animal veterinarians. And I think this scholarship is a great piece. I don't know which doctor who wants to discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, I think as Representative Cook said, we all realize there's a shortage of veterinarians, extreme shortage in rural Kentucky, but even the small animal practitioners and the equine practitioners are having problems now of getting a full workforce. So we feel that this scholarship program could help maybe alleviate the problem. I'm sure we'll probably be looking at the food animal rural area sector first, because that's the most extreme shortage at this point in time. As far as as part of that, we have the facility registration where we can help identify where the clinics are in Kentucky and get an idea of how short some of these counties are. We as an association attempted to do this about 5 or 6 years ago, and the data was just not there for us to be able to identify all the practices in the state. When we register as veterinarians, we usually put just our name and our home addresses for many people, and that's just not an accurate reflection of who's practicing in areas, especially up in my area where I'm sitting close to Cincinnati. There's a lot of veterinarians with Kentucky mailing address that are actually practicing over in Cincinnati. So those two sections kind of go hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all of you. I know you put in a yeoman's effort on this, and I really appreciate, while that doesn't have anything to do directly with taking care of animals in the present moment, the effort to put in some data collection on that. We've got a real issue in large parts of our state, especially in the large animal context, and we all know we've got to do something, but you're firing in the dark if you don't know what you're dealing with, and being able to drill down into some of this data, while it really excites nerds like me, it does have some benefits too, so we can take hopefully a more targeted approach as we work through some possible solutions to close the gap on our veterinarian shores, and especially in our large animal field. And I appreciate all your work. We joked earlier that in working through this, that when this statute was worked through, the tele that we dealt with was television, and most of us were watching it on black and white. or the ugly color. And now so much of what we do is through telehealth. The industry and everything has evolved so far, so fast, and it was time to go back and through it. It's a thankless job, but it was really need to be done. I know that all of you have much more to do with your lives and practices than sit and go through all this, but I can speak for everyone that we really do appreciate all of your hard work and time spent. Also, I know that Dave Maples and Nikki are here with Cattlemen's Association. They had worked with y'all on this, and I think that they're good with everything. I gave them the chance to speak, but Dave deferred here. Does anyone have any questions or anything? There's been a motion. Senator Webb?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't explain myself a little bit, but I appreciate all the work that's been done in this. I appreciate the communication. I appreciate Dr. Park, who's actually saved one of my horses in the past. But I'm not only a stockman, I'm an attorney. Sometimes it's a blessing and a curse. And when I look at this bill, I know a lot of it had national model language. Anytime you have national model language, you don't know who was at table in the national level, and believe me, there are people at that table that want to put you out of business and me out of business as a stockman. And there were some of the language did concern me about if it was implemented in a legalistic manner. Not that the board would do that or the profession itself, but that it would be implemented by others, bringing criminal charges or involved in civil cases, because I also deal with that on a national level in litigation as well. So those were my concerns. And anytime I get an animal bill, I will look at it in that light. And I just appreciate, and tell Dr. Smith I appreciate him too. Cause, but that was my, I spent a lot of time on this, and I appreciate the changes that were made. Telehealth is necessary. We want ideas to incent veterinarians. That is a huge problem, and we've been trying to do that for several years now. Your structure, your governance, your ability to put in place for veterinarians under stress in their profession and all that, and bring it up to the other professions. I appreciate that. I think that's also necessary. I still may have a question about confidentiality carry forward, but we'll work on that, and we'll see how this unauthorized practice provisions are implemented. And I think you will be prudent in doing that and the pursuit of that. And as to the equine dentist, which I know a few, and I don't, I think there is a way, and I think the sponsor and I have talked about this, to accommodate them and elevate them in their profession, if you will, because they have several hours of school, and not minimizing the practice for especially rural horse health and practice of folks that have done it for thousands of years. And try to elevate the dentists to where they need to be, but not preclude someone else from taking care of animals in another setting. So those have been my concerns. Most of those concerns have been addressed. I appreciate working with you. I look forward to working with you again. And it's the truth. You all don't have time for this as practitioners, but it's very important to your profession, and we appreciate it as well. So I will second that.
Thanks,
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Webb. And just one comment, if I could, on the allied health professionals.
Sure.
There was actually a large list of those. And I think one thing we want to do is we took equine dentist out of this. One thing I plan on doing is during the interim is actually hosting a meeting, bring some of the allied health professionals in there, and let's look at and take a hard look at what needs to come under the umbrella. So that's one of the many follow-ups that I'm sure will occur with this bill.
Couple of house cleanings on this. Members, there is a local mandate and corrections impact statement in your packet if you're interested.
It's not in their packet.
Okay, we can make those available if you have any questions on them. They were minimal impact. Another thing, there are a lot of young people out in the audience who love having y'all here. For those of you that want to stay in rural Kentucky but maybe aren't set up to farm or don't want to, everything in life breaks down to supply and demand, and this is a good life. It's a good way to make a living. It's a good way to contribute back to your community. So bone up on that science as you go through school, so you'll need it if you want to get into the vet arena. We have a motion and a second on the bill. If no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Chambers Armstrong, Senator Boswell, Senator Carpenter, Senator Deneen, Senator Givens,
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take a brief moment, cast a yes vote, and applaud you as chairman for working with the sponsor. The sponsor, thank you for your work on this matter over a long period of time, and thanks for engaging all the stakeholders the way you do. This is the way legislation is supposed to be done. It's not easy, but it's important. So thank you for your leadership. Mr. Chairman, thank you for rolling up your sleeves and working as well.
Senator Thayer, Senator Webb, Senator West, Senator Westerfield, Senator Wilson, and Chair Howell.
Aye. This passes unanimously. Welcome, Leader Thayer, just in time. So it still passes unanimously, and I would like to keep this off of consent and talk about it a little bit because I think our veterinarian issue is important enough. We might want to talk about it on the floor a little bit. So appreciate everyone's hard work and effort on that, and look forward to going through this and maybe coming back and look at a few things in there in them that Representative Cook had talked about. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next up, we have Representative Josh Branscombe for House Bill 4. Please proceed up with the people you've got with you. While they're coming up, Leader Thayer, would you like to register a vote on House Bill 76?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was in another committee meeting, and I would like to register an aye vote on House Bill 76.
Senator Wilson, I believe you were out too. Would you like to register a vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was in another committee, and I'd like to register an aye vote.
Yeah, appreciate. I know everybody's hustling today, moving back and forth between committees. Appreciate your time and coming here. Representative Branscombe, floor is yours. Please proceed.
Josh Branscombe, State Representative, Kentucky House, 83rd District.
Kyle Kelly with Kentucky Farm Bureau.
Before we proceed, there's a committee sub on this too. Let's go ahead and get that out. There's been a motion by Senator Thayer, second by Senator Webb. All in favor of adopting the committee sub, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Committee sub is adopted. Representative Branscombe, please proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Before you today is House Bill 4, which is a landowner protection bill that passed the House 99-0, supported by Kentucky Farm Bureau, Kentucky League of Cities, KCO, Kentucky County Judges Executives Association, and the Magistrates and Commissioners Association. This bill probably looked familiar to many of you, as this is a combination between last year's House Bill 392 and Senate Bill 69. The primary purpose of the bill remains the same as last year, to establish state-level decommissioning requirements so that when these merchant electric generating facilities, such as the solar facilities that we're seeing pop up across the state, are at the end of their useful life, which could be 20 or 30 years down the road, that there are requirements and procedures in statute for requiring the facility owner to return that land back to its previous form. And equally important, requiring that the facility owner maintains a financial assurance, such as a bond for the life of the project to cover the cost of that decommissioning. This ensures that the cost for the decommissioning and the removal of the equipment, which could be, like I said, 20 or 30 years down the road, does not fall on the back of our farmers, our landowners, and our fellow Kentuckians. We have to be proactive, and I say this every time I talk about this bill. We have to be proactive in making sure that we don't run into a situation that we have in Kentucky right now, especially down in my area, where we have over 14,000 orphan oil and gas wells across rural Kentucky, and having to rely on federal funds, which is taxpayer money, to decommission or plug those. The Senate committee sub that you have adopted, I've been working with the chairman on that. And Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to go through those changes.
Yeah. First of all, Representative Branscombe, thank you. I know you've wrestled this bear to the ground for 2 years now, and there's been a lot to it and a lot of people involved. We appreciate all the work that you've done on that. We looked at this a little bit and kind of worked through some small changes to kind of get another set of eyes on it, if nothing else, and look at some issues involving the decommissioning bonds and the review of the decommissioning bonds in Section 5 of this statute, excuse me, that looked like everything pointed to an intended purpose on the local planning and zoning and how that was impacted to not be part of the Secretary of Energy Environment Cabinet's periodic review of these bonds and decommissioning plans, but there was conflicting language in there, so we went in and cleared that up a little bit to establish that while local primacy through Section 6 of the Act is preserved everywhere it was intended to be preserved, that it didn't get in the way of everything else that was set in place in Section 5 of this Act to allow the Secretary to review decommissioning plans and the bonds that go with them. And then we made a couple of more little changes to just kind of try to clarify the landowner rights with the decommissioning and with the removal, and is often the process. I will take 100% responsibility for this. In Section 2M2, I believe, we made some changes in the statute and had an unintended consequence. There was a negotiated part of this, I understand, in the interim, to where the companies would only take things down to 3 feet below surface. And there's some question that the language that we put in there to try to make it clear actually made it more confusing. So I'm working with bill writing now to go back and do a floor amendment to clean that little piece up, but we want to go ahead and move it. So there's a little language change there, and in 6 we got to change one word that we meant to say one thing and we sent another that really doesn't have any real impact on it. It's just a drafting error that I probably wouldn't even go and look at in a floor amendment, but we're going to do it on this, so we're going to do it on that. But that was the basis of the things that we did. There were a couple other little tweaks we made in the committee sub, but those were the relevant things.
Provisions from last year's bill that have stayed in this bill. 2 local appointees will stay on the siding board through the construction instead of going off the board before construction. We thought it was important that while these facilities are being built, that you have that local presence there. The bill allows local planning and zone to have primacy over the decommissioning requirements and the bonds, establishes a detailed decommissioning plan and bond requirements to be included with each landowner's lease agreement. And the bond shall not lapse, and establishes that the bond amount is updated a minimum of every 5 years by an independent licensed engineer upon the transfer of ownership. Some of the new provisions that are different from last year's bill: the bond is to be provided by a surety that shall at all times maintain at least an excellent rating as measured by AM Best Rating Agency. The Energy and Environment Cabinet shall have oversight over after construction is complete and the generation begins, to ensure compliance with bond reviews, the decommissioning, and the monitoring. A restrictive fund was created so that the facility owner pays into the fund to offset any cost for EEC oversight. This keeps our taxpayers from having to pay for that. And finally, there's a penalty provision in case of any violations that was added to the bill as well. Mr. Chairman, I think this is a good start, establishing what are the minimum statutory requirements for what's going to be, in a lot of cases, a 20 to 30 year process. Like I said, it's a good start, and I appreciate the committee's consideration.
Just a couple more little comments on that. Something you said I think is really key. This is a start because this industry is just now developing. We're going to see, we've already seen a lot of changes. The march toward grid parity that we've seen in the solar industry in the last 10 or 15 years has been amazing with the rapid changes in the technology it's used. That's probably not going to stop. This will be an evolutionary process. There'll be things that we have to go back and change, and I appreciate all the effort that you put in to allow this to kind of be a living, breathing document as far as the review of the decommissioning and bond goes, because things are going to change as we go. We don't know what they will. If we did, we'd make a lot of money off this, but we don't. Nobody knows what the future will hold. We just know it'll hold something. And thank you for trying to make that as open as it is, so that we can make adjustments as we go, as the environment around this changes. I guess we'll do questions now. We have someone else that wants to speak on this, but is there anybody else that wants to speak in favor of this bill? So I'll open it up to questions now for these gentlemen, and then we'll move on to the next presenter. Anyone have any questions? Senator Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions just about local control, and some of these questions, there might be other speakers that could answer as well. My first question is, and Mr. Chair, assuming that you will allow me 2 questions. Thank you. My first question is around the protections that might be in place in local ordinance that might be more protective of landowners. Let's say that there are some local ordinances that provide more protections than this bill has. How would this legislation impact that? Would this preempt some of those local ordinances? And what might we expect to see in those local government situations?
Thank you, Senator. I believe that is Section 2, we give the locals the control over that to as the process is beginning. The locals have that. They have the authority over the decommissioning. They already have it over the setbacks. So we give that local control to them for that.
Okay, thank you. And I have.
But before you go on, I want to add something to that. The Representative Branscombe referenced there is that the local planning and zoning, if it affects anything with solar, that has to be what the siting board reviews in the approval process of it. So the locals have primacy in that issue, and anything else that addresses Section 2 that Representative Branscombe, and specifically I believe subsection 3, there's also a catch-all in Section 6 where we give primacy to Section 700 and to Sections 2, 3, and 4 of this Act, which is where all this is contained. So it's kind of directly impacted to preserve local contributions and control, and then there's kind of a catch-all in Section 6 that anything that we missed or there's a question about reaffirms the local input on the application and permitting side of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead with your next question.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, and just one quick follow-up because I'm just trying to make sure I understand the ways that this interacts. And I do want to say thank you to the sponsor for the work. I think the intent behind this is excellent. You've done a lot of work with the chairman, and I appreciate how hard you all have worked on this issue. So just to follow up, the chairman used the example of construction permits, and just to make sure I understand, let's say a company had a construction permit from the siting board, maybe they were already operational. If local government adopted an ordinance that conflicted with that permit, would this bill require them to make changes? Would it not? How would that interact?
The local board has. Remember, you got two local people on the siting board. You have a local judge or whoever's in charge of that or the municipality. So there's that local input on the very beginning. As the siting board process is taking effect. So there's local involvement all throughout. And the locals have the opportunity to comment on what they want the decommissioning requirements to be. Statute already allows them to have the setback requirements. So they would need to comment on that, prior to the construction certificate being issued.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you for allowing me a follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Senator Boswell, I believe you had a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank you for all the work you've done on this. This is a very important bill, and for years I've been dealing with this with solar and other people coming to try to lease some of my property, and I've never signed a contract yet because it's very, very complicated. Yes. And so people that don't have the advantage of having an attorney or something of that nature are going to need these protections. I do have one question, and it's regarding the term merchant electric generating. There's a relatively new process or a type of energy that's kind of making its way into Kentucky that I've been approached about recently, and it has to do with battery storage facilities where they take power off the grid and they put it back on when it's needed. Is that taken into consideration in this bill?
This bill is specific to merchant electric generating facilities. So if they fall under the statutory definition of that, then it probably could. But it would just depend on whether they fall under that definition.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if this becomes part of our life, if it's not, we'll probably have to add those because they're massive and they're large batteries. And at some point in the future, those batteries are going to need some attention. So I think you might be able to make the argument that they're generating because if they take it in, and then they generate it back out. But I hope so.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions of these gentlemen? If y'all, Kyle, do you want to introduce yourself for the record? Or anything you want to say before? You've been awfully silent over there.
Has been, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Kyle Kelly with Kentucky Farm Bureau. This has, over the last 2 years, been discussed many times. Just appreciate your leadership on it, Representative Branscombe. It's become a priority for our members all across the Commonwealth, and we believe this is certainly a step in the right direction on putting statutory protections on the landowners. So thank you for your work on it, Chairman.
Thank you. If you guys will step back, Tom Fitzgerald is here. He's asked to speak. We're always happy to have him appear before us. Mr. Fitzgerald, pull you up a chair, sit down, introduce yourself from the record, and the floor is yours.
Members of the committee, Tom Fitzgerald. I am now a short-termer. I am the of counsel for the Kentucky Resources Council and heading out the door. I appreciate this opportunity. My comments today are not directed towards the sponsor nor towards his intent, but they are addressed to this bill. And, Mr. Chairman, while I appreciate very much your efforts to try to fix some of the problems with the bill, the key problem with the bill remains that the developer, whoever the developer later sells the project to, and not the landowner who leases the land, largely controls under this bill what gets left behind when these solar arrays have ceased to have any value. The House bill weakened the current siting board process that imposed in at least 18 siting board orders a requirement that everything above and below ground be removed unless the landowner asks otherwise. The language in the committee sub tries to fix that problem, but it doesn't, unfortunately. The fix is simple. Everything goes unless the landowner asks otherwise. That should be the rule. That is not the rule in this bill. The other troubling provisions in the original bill that are not changed by the sub are the removal of the current requirement that when you change rights and responsibilities after this facility is up and running, that you get approval. So we know that the person you're selling it to has the wherewithal and the ability and the track record to properly operate the facility. That's gone under this bill. This bill declares void provisions under a number, I think about a dozen board orders that in fact did have county representatives that said if you change ownership or control of the LLCs in the future, you should get board approval. There's actually a pending case where one of the companies doesn't like that provision. This would void that order and resolve that case for the developer and would avoid about 12 other orders that the counties did participate in. It places the decision-making on the bond amount in the hands of a third party who is not a governmental authority and who is not accountable for the decision that they make. It confounds the already clear language that we wrote 20 years ago, and I had the privilege of being part of the initial drafting of this 20 years ago when it wasn't solar facilities, it was Enron and the rest of them that were trying to come to Kentucky. Some of you will remember that. The already clear language that preserved local authority, specifically home rule, is narrowed by this bill, not preserved. And finally, counties and cities that have relied on the siting board to protect the landowners are going to have to affirmatively change ordinances in order to try to restore protections that this bill takes away. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I've worked with KRC, with counties, to help them enact solar ordinances that try to strike a balance of in allowing these facilities but making sure that they were compatible with existing land uses and didn't burden communities. The aggressive efforts by developers to weaken the rules that are in place has changed my perspective, frankly. This bill is not needed to protect landowners. It's not needed to empower local communities. It does nothing but weaken what is already in place, and what is being required hasn't stopped developers from coming to Kentucky. There are about 20 approved orders for construction of these facilities already. This bill is about weakening the standards of accountability and weakening local control in order to suit the desires of these companies to the detriment of landowners and counties. and I urge you not to be part of this effort. My personal recommendation going forward to landowners who formerly could trust that the siting board, even in the absence of local ordinances, had the power to require these LLCs to post a full and adequate bond, to remove all their junk, and to assure that the projects only got sold to people who had the wherewithal to manage them properly. My recommendation will be this to landowners. Unless and until there is a new ordinance locally adopted or revised that restores what this bill takes away, just say no. Thanks, Chair Howell, members of the committee. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I have grappled with this. I've lost a lot of sleep over it because I am very troubled that this bill is not a step forward. This bill is a step backwards. And I'm happy to answer any questions to get as far down in the weeds as anybody wants to. And, Mr. Chairman, if we do have a country theme for my testimony. If you want to know what it is, you had the opportunity to guess it earlier.
Humor me. I couldn't pick up on it. You're too crafty for me.
It's don't come home leasing with solar on your mind.
Oh, God. You and Leader Thayer could get together and try to tell jokes.
No, he'll beat me every time.
Leader Thayer.
I'd like to make a motion that House Bill 4 be reported favorably. Motion same shall pass.
If there are any other questions, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? There's a second. Before we do that, I do have one comment, Mr. Fitzgerald. I want to take exception at one thing you said.
Absolutely.
Nobody believes it, even though you're retiring, that you're going to go away. You're going to be around because you love this stuff, and you're not leaving us for good. Nobody's buying your claim there.
Mr. Chair, I will be back if I'm asked to, but the shoes are going to the Fraser History Museum. Perfect. Hopefully, I won't still be in them when they get there. When they called and said they weren't.
If you are, that we'll make sure they put them toes up. How's
just
that?
come visit me if I am. But I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. It's been a privilege.
Appreciate it. We have a motion and a second on on House Bill 4 as amended by the committee sub. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Chambers Armstrong.
I'd like to explain my vote, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
I'm going to cast a pass vote for now. Again, I appreciate the intent behind the bill and providing protections for rural landowners. I am troubled by some of the issues raised by Mr. Fitzgerald and want to make sure that we are, in fact, providing those protections to rural landowners. It's my understanding there might be some language that's going to be worked out before this gets to the floor, and I would like to see that before ultimately casting a vote on this bill. And so for now, I'm voting pass and keeping an open mind as the conversation continues. Thank you.
Senator Boswell. Aye. Senator Carpenter. Senator Deneen. Aye. Senator Givens.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to briefly explain my vote.
Proceed.
Proud to cast an aye vote. Appreciate the work of everyone engaged in this conversation, very much so. I think that the charge and the reminder I'm going to make to my colleagues is once this goes in statute, there will be changes over the course of time. In the absence of anything being written in legislation right now, it is the Wild Wild West. Mm-hmm. So if your concern is about the perfect, don't let that be the enemy of the possible. Let's get this in statute today, and then, trust me, we'll be back in Leader Thayer 8 months, 9 months, and we'll have lots of hammers looking for nails when that time comes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Thayer. Aye. Senator Webb.
Explain my vote.
Proceed.
I'm going to vote aye, Mr. Chairman, today, but I do share some of the concerns. I've been involved in siting issues for a number of years as well. Remember the ones referenced, and I think siting is very important, and I would be inclined to agree with my colleague at the bar and tell people not to do this if you own farmland. I think we've got to make an effort to protect and preserve our farmland, and until we get it right, I think we're risking that. Thank you.
Senator West. Senator Westerfield.
May I explain my vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I vote aye. I'm glad to see the bill. Christian County was a target of one of these companies wanting to build a project that was going to be about 200 or 300 foot from my front door. So I was pretty eager to see our fiscal court take things carefully and make sure that they proceeded with the right amount of caution and, in fact, enacted their own ordinance. I want to make sure counties can do that. and particularly because of the decommissioning requirements that are in this bill. One of the things that particular company didn't do was explain. Certainly didn't volunteer putting any decommissioning requirements on them. Now, once the fiscal court and some of us citizens that were going to be impacted about it started talking about it, well, they were quick to say, well, sure, absolutely, please. The fact that they didn't volunteer that signals to me the character of the people that we're dealing with and the company that we're dealing with. I'm glad to see some protections there. I'm sure Senator Givens is absolutely right that we'll continue to revisit this over time and as the market builds itself out. But in the meantime, I want to make sure counties and the people and the landowners have some protection and they're able to influence the policy at the local level like they want to govern the property rights and to make sure to protect the property rights of all those involved. Because at some point, what you can do with your property can, in fact, influence the value of mine. And I want to make sure that my rights are protected just as much as the next guy's. So I'm glad to see the bill. I appreciate the sponsor bringing it.
Senator Wilson. And Chair Howell.
Aye. So it passes how many? 8? House Bill 5 passes with 8 ayes, 1 pass. We will not put this, we wouldn't have put this on consent anyway. Gentlemen, thank you for all your hard work on this, and that will go to the floor. We have 2 resolutions up, Senate Resolution 153 and 154. They were sponsored by Senator Adams. She is held up in committee, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed with Senate Resolution 153 myself. These are 2 appointments. The first is appointing John Cox to the State Fair Board. If there's anyone has any discussion on this, we can. Otherwise, do I have a motion on the resolution? Senator Dean's made a motion. Senator Thayer?
Mr. Chairman, do you have the reports from staff that indicate both of these men have undergone the requisite Kentucky State Police background check and meet all statutory requirements for service on?
That has been
Fair
presented,
Board?
but it's not here with us. If that's something that you would like to see, we can pass over these and come back to them at a later date.
Let's get them out. We can always pull them off later if there are problems.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor by Senator Deneen. Do we have a second? So there's been a motion and a second. Without any question, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Chambers Armstrong. Senator Boswell. Senator Carpenter. Senator Deneen. Senator Givens. Senator Thayer. Senator Webb. Senator West. Senator Westerfield. Senator Wilson. Chair Howell.
Leader Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for members' information, what we're doing with resolutions on confirmations of gubernatorial appointments is we are putting them on a separate consent calendar, and it will not be considered until the last 2 days of the legislative session. That way, if there are any problems with any of them, we can take the subsequent action. So with that in mind, I do move that Senate Resolution 153 be placed on consent.
There's been a motion for consent. Is there a second? Second. There's a second by Senator Boswell. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That will be put on the separate consent. Thank you, Leader Thayer. Next up, we have Senate Resolution 154 to confirm the appointment of Hans Poppy to the Kentucky State Fair Board. If there's any questions about this, we can address it. Otherwise, do I have a motion on the resolution? Motion by Senator Armstrong. Is there a second? Second by Leader Thayer. Without any discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Chambers Armstrong. Senator Boswell. Senator Carpenter. Senator Deneen. Senator Givens. Senator Thayer. Senator Webb. Senator West. Senator Westerfield. Senator Wilson. And Chair Howell.
That passes. Is there a motion to put on consent? Motion by Senator Givens, second by Senator Westerfield. All signify by saying aye. All opposed. Senator Givens, I believe you have something. Sure. So that will go on the consent as well. Senator Givens. We did not. It was unanimous. There's been a motion for consent. Is there a second? Second by Senator Armstrong. Vote by signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. That will go on consent as well. Boys, do y'all have anything else we want to go through? All right, then I guess we'll get out of here. Thank